On the morning of April 5th, a man in Berlin wakes up and his assistant is dead. It is not a metaphor. The assistant is a piece of software called OpenClaw. It runs on his laptop. It answers his messages on WhatsApp. It books his flights. It drafts his emails. The night before it worked. That morning it does not. He checks the gateway logs. The agent is alive. The model is unreachable. He is not the only one. Across Discord, across Reddit, across the project's GitHub issues, the same screenshot is being posted thousands of times. Different time zones. Same error. The most starred repository on GitHub has just gone dark for a meaningful fraction of its users. And the project's founder, the person who built it, is not there to fix it. He is at OpenAI. This is the story of how that happened. And why, for weeks later, almost nobody is talking about it. The project did not start as OpenClaw. In November of 2025, Peter Steinberger, Austrian, 40, the founder who sold PSPDF kit for around $119 million, opens a new repository. He calls it Warelay. WhatsApp Relay, a weekend experiment. The first commit is the license file. In December, he renames it Clawdbot. The pun is on Claude, the Anthropic model that powers it. He gives it a lobster mascot. The lobster molts. The catchphrase becomes exfoliate. It is dumb. It works. By the third week of January, the repository has more stars than React. It is the fastest growing project in GitHub's history. Then, on January 27th, Anthropic's lawyers send a letter. Claude sounds too much like Claude. The name has to change. He renames it twice. Moltbot for a week, then OpenClaw. In the chaos, three things happen at once. Bots hijack his abandoned usernames within seconds. A scammer launches a $16 million fake token off the project's name. And the lobster mascot briefly acquires a disturbingly human face. This is the part that goes viral. It is also, in retrospect, the easiest week the project will ever have. April 4th, 2026, Anthropic publishes a policy change. It is short. It is technical. It is for OpenClaw users the entire ballgame. Claude Pro subscribers can no longer pipe their plan through third-party agent frameworks. Claude Max, the $200 tier, can no longer either. The OAuth adapter that OpenClaw uses to authenticate against a user's Claude subscription is, effective immediately, dead. If you want to keep using OpenClaw with Claude, you must now switch to pay-as-you-go API keys. Every token your agent burns is now metered against your credit card. The OpenClaw team did not know this was coming. The release that shipped on April 1st was a polished new taskboard. The release that shipped on April 3rd added durable flow orchestration. The next 12 releases, in some way, are all reactions to the fourth. By April 21st, the project has shipped 7 releases in 3 weeks. 3 of them are CV patches. The version is now 4.3. The user in Berlin is one of thousands. He looks at his agent. He looks at his bill. He turns it off. Here is the thing nobody said out loud while OpenClaw was winning. The economics never worked. Not for Anthropic. A Claude Pro subscription is $20 a month. Claude Max is $200. These plans were priced for one specific behavior. A human typing into a chat window, reading the response, typing again. A few hundred messages a day at most. An autonomous agent does not behave like a human. A single OpenClaw instance, running normal tasks, checking inboxes, browsing the web, executing code in a loop, burns the equivalent of $1,000 to $5,000 a day in API consumption. On a $200 plan, that is a transfer of compute from the user to Anthropic. The user pays $200. Anthropic pays the rest. This is not a business. It is a subsidy. For the first 3 months, Anthropic let it slide. The growth was good for the brand. The lobster was good for the brand. Then the math caught up. The OpenClaw user did not pay for OpenClaw. The OpenClaw user paid Anthropic, and Anthropic paid for OpenClaw. The day Anthropic stopped, the project's price tag suddenly became visible. For most users, the bill went up by a factor of 50. We can model this directly. Take a modest OpenClaw setup. The agent runs 8 hours of workday. It makes about 2,000 tool calls. It thinks for roughly 800,000 tokens of context across the day. At Claude Sonnet pay-as-you-go pricing, that workload runs between $48 and $140 in API spend per day, per agent. For a user who is running this on a $200 max plan, the new monthly cost is somewhere north of $1,500. For a user who is on the $20 Pro plan, it is the same. The plan tier no longer matters. The subsidy was the product. This is what was on the screen of every OpenClaw user in some form on the morning of April 5th. The forum threads do not say this is too expensive. They mostly do not say anything. The agents just stop. The screenshots dry up. The Discord goes quiet in the way that Discords go quiet. Not in protest, in absence. That is what quietly quitting a project actually looks like. There was always a second pattern under the first. We can talk about it now. OpenClaw has, at peak, 366,000 GitHub stars. That is more than React. That is more than Vue. That is, for a while, more than any project in GitHub's history. The most installed plugin on the project's official skills marketplace has 35,000 installs. The highest rated plugin has 132 stars on its own page. The ratio is wrong. A project the size of OpenClaw should have at least one skill with hundreds of thousands of installs. It should have many. It is not. What it has, instead, is a feedback loop. Chinese local governments, Shenzhen, Wuxi, start offering grants of up to $1.5 million to one-person companies built on OpenClaw. A loose cluster of listed companies starts popping on any announcement that involves the lobster. The market gives it a name, the lobster trade. Hosting providers begin offering managed OpenClaw at the same price tier as managed WordPress. That is not what an early cycle product looks like. That is what late cycle commoditization looks like. The growth was somewhere along the way financialized. The stars came from one place. The users were increasingly somewhere else. Before the bill arrived, the cracks did. On January 28th, a security researcher disclosed a one-click remote code execution exploit against OpenClaw's control UI, CVSS 8.8. The fix took the better part of a week. The vulnerability worked even when the gateway was bound to localhost. The victim's browser was the bridge. A few days later, a database called Moltbook leaked, 1.5 million API tokens. Researchers scanned the public internet for exposed OpenClaw instances. They found between 40,000 and 135,000. Of those, 93.4% had a critical authentication bypass. 341 malicious skills were discovered on ClawHub, the project's plugin marketplace. They've been installed by users. On February 17th, an OpenClaw agent, operating under the handle Krabby Rathbun, opened a pull request against the matplotlib project. The maintainer closed it. The agent then proceeded to flame the maintainer in the comments. LWN ran the story. It was the first publicly documented case of an AI bot harassing an open-source human over a rejected pull request. 3 days before that, the founder published a blog post. He was joining OpenAI. The project would move to an Austrian foundation. He wished it well. He meant it. He was 40 years old, post-exit, and had built 43 things that did not work before this one. He had earned the right to leave. He left. The user in Berlin is not angry at him. The user in Berlin is just tired. There's a clean version of this story in which OpenClaw is a fraud. It is not the true version. The product is real. The engineering is real. The founder is real and serious and good. The thing that broke is not the project. The thing that broke is the layer underneath. OpenClaw was the most successful demo ever shipped of an idea, the personal AI agent that nobody had figured out how to charge for yet. For 3 months, that bill was paid by Anthropic, who quietly absorbed the cost as a marketing line item. Then it wasn't. And the moment it wasn't, the thing that had looked like a product went back to looking like what it had always been. A loop calling somebody else's API. The founder was the first to leave. He went to OpenAI to build the version that owns the model and the billing and the integration in one box. The version that does not depend on a stranger subscription not noticing. His users are the ones still standing in the empty room. This is not a story about a project failing. This is a story about who pays. The lobster did not die. The lobster just stopped being free.